Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about this helmet right here, the Deepest Tower. I guess you've seen this helmet on the ladder. 6% of people are playing it right now, at least in the top ranks. I'm pretty sure Pure 2 Ninja only finds the top levels. So what's the deal with it? What exactly is going on right here? Well, we're gonna go over it. So, Deepest Tower, first up, not the best base. Armor, energy shield, pretty meh, as we know. Evasion is currently absolute king, and a little bit of evasion shield is not gonna do much. Good life roll. This is actually corrupted higher, so usually goes from 70 to 100, so that's decent. Chaos res, premium. And then it has a downside, which is reduced presence area of effect, and we're gonna go over that in a second. But the big line here is at the end, enemies in your presence count as being on low life. Let's go over some of the things that this helmet actually does. So if you go over it and you press Alt and you click over low life, it will tell you that it's usually 35% or less of enemy life. So once they drop down to 35%, you get all the effectiveness of whatever effects you have. Now, that's pretty good. That's like a third of the time, let's just say. But this one cranks it up to all the time. But what can you actually do with that? Well, the first thing is execute support. That is the most obvious one, and that is out of the gate. If you think about it, usually this would probably deal round about 16.6% more damage if you don't have Culling Strike, if you can actually use all the bottom, the ladder stages of the HP. So it's not a bad support, right? They just buffed it from 40 to 50%. On average, it's not bad, but you don't really get any front-loaded damage. However, yeah, this goes up from 16.6 to 50% more damage. So if you calc that all out versus opportunity cost of having another support, which supports are usually not that strong in this game. Maybe your last support would have been like 15% more damage or something. This actually comes out pretty good, and this alone makes the helmet deal round about 20% more damage out of the gates, which just that alone, pretty damn good, right? Reasonable helmet, 20% more damage, life, chaos race. You don't really have that many damage multipliers in the game, so that is a very solid helmet. But the other part of it is actually for attack-based builds, and this is damage against enemies on low life. On the passive tree, there are exactly two clusters, right here and down here. And the big nodes, very cool. Damage against enemies is lucky. Depending on your damage range, that is quite strong. For example, on a Fizz build, what you can do is make that a little bit bigger with stuff like Heft or Reslafa build. But yeah, you also get the 60% increased damage against enemies that are on low life with 30% stun buildup. So these are very good. And then down here, you have 120% increased damage with hits against enemies that are on low life, which is completely outrageous. And yeah, the biggest thing you haven't even talked about, which are the small nodes. These are 30% each. You want to take each and every single one of them. In terms of efficiency, this will absolutely skyrocket your passive tree, and increased damage is actually quite hard to get on quite a few archetypes. For example, this is a poison build. It would have been very increased damage starved. I would have had to do some crazy stuff on the tree to actually get there. This solved all of these issues. I have like 400 plus, I think even 500 plus increased damage right here. Now, okay, so that's basically the foundation of it, right? Execute and these two clusters. There's a little bit more to it though. The first one is it has Titan Synergies. So with seeing how strong these nodes are, right, if they go from 30 to let's say 45 or something like hulking form, all of a sudden you realize there's 8 of these nodes. So Titan intrinsically now gives another, on top of that, another 120% increased damage. Now on my example, which is a poison shield charger, which I'm going to talk about in a second, this helmet, with all the things I've just talked about, comes out to around about 110% more damage versus a version that doesn't use it. Yeah, if you can take advantage of all of those, Deepest Tower will be insane. Now, let's talk about the downside, which is reduced presence area of effect. I here have a badly corrupted on top. Usually it's 50% straight up reduced presence area of effect. And if you don't know what that means, presence is usually 4 meters around your character. If you press right here, you can always see your presence radius if you hover over. So you can see this is the reduced presence area with only 2 meters. So only in this small area, you actually get all the buffs I just talked about. Now, this is actually not a big deal for dot archetypes because dots in this game revolve around your hit. So for example, when I shield charge on top of an enemy and they get hit, boom, they get hit, it will always be point blank. And now they have that dot, and if I move away, it doesn't change, right? It has already been applied according to the hit. It's all well and done, right? And this happens to like basically every dot. Whenever you have a dot, you apply it, and it works. It's kind of like on Titan, for example, if you apply a dot during heavy stun, you always get the 50% more damage even once the heavy stun runs out. So if you're playing a melee build, or especially a melee-based dot build, then this is incredible, right? This is straight up GG. But the other thing is you can also make up for the Presence AoE, and for how much damage this helmet gives, it's actually quite a big deal. Now, they added actually quite a bit of stuff that has to do with Presence AoE on the passive tree. The first one is here, which does count a lot of points, especially if you're not crit multi-based. If you are, though, those are most likely worth it regardless. You have a 3-pointer here with 10% and then 30% here, which is decent, right? So you can make up for that. And you have this big cluster up here, which is probably the most efficient one, 15, 20, 20, 30. So that would straight up alleviate all your problems. There is also a talisman. Here it is, the Ox Talisman, which goes into boots. Boots usually only have one rune, but if you corrupt it and you get a second one, you can get up to 40% Presence AoE. And I'm saying all of this because this is not 50% less Presence AoE. This is 50% reduced. So if you get 50% increased, you're back at 0. And if you're one of those fancy melee builds that has there's Giant's Blood with a Scepter offhand, also there is 80% increased Presence AoE, which even overshoots. So you're going to be able to hit most of the screen. Now, reduced Presence AoE might actually end up being an upside in the future. If you think about, I don't know, for example, maybe there's damage against enemies that aren't in your presence, right? Stuff like that. Currently, a lot of those effects on right side are kind of tied towards meters, right? So for example, here you have more damage enemies within and then more damage further away. It doesn't really like mention presence, but maybe that will be in the future, or maybe there is already something that I missed. If you found something, put it in the comments or whatever. But yeah, this could be a potential upside even in the future, so look out for that. With that said, I'm currently running it on a melee shield charge build. I basically needed more damage and especially increased damage because as a poison build, you extremely spread thin. I want to take the poison nodes a little bit, right? I want to take the magnitude, chance to poison. I want to also get block capped so I don't just fall over. I want CDR for the shield charge so I can move around faster. So yeah, in total, there was a lot of moving parts, and this helmet just completely alleviated my need for increased damage. And once again, on a Titan, it is just incredible how much power you get out of those nodes. It also means that I get more chance to poison from these small nodes and more magnitude. But yeah, as for what I'm doing with the build, I'm currently leveling a Poison Titan, as you saw, Shield Charge, and that is for a few reasons. Shield Charge got buffed up to 900% damage effectiveness at level 20. It goes up to like 2,500 or something in endgame when I'm gonna be at like level 34. And it just applies a huge poison with the right shield, which you can even apply multiple times because we're also scaling cooldown recovery. And then there's also Plague Bearer, which you're seeing in the background, these huge green explosions. It is possible to get that much AoE because of the, what's it called, Expand support, which basically adds an 8-second cooldown but gives you 50% more AoE. But since we're scaling cooldown recovery, you're always pressing it. Basically, you're never restricted at all. You couple that with magnified effect and all of that, and you just get what you're seeing on the screen right now. To make this even crazier, we have Herald of Plague, which basically proliferates those poisons and just spreads them on kill, and you just have this massive chain reaction. So yeah, I'm kind of prepping the build right now, and we'll see where it goes. Hopefully I get a video out before Last Epoch drops. But yeah, that's about all I have to say. Definitely check out Deepest Towers. If it fits your build, if you can make it work, you'll definitely not regret it. And yeah, with that being said, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.